I never thought I'd return to this beach. For 11 years, I'd avoided Rockport like a sailor avoids a reef known to tear hulls apart. Yet here I stood, the late afternoon sun warming my face, watching the same waves that had carried Jonathan's ashes away from me forever. Or so I'd believed. My worn sneakers sank slightly into the damp sand as I walked the shoreline, collecting small fragments of sea glass out of habit. Blue, my favorite. Jonathan always said it matched my eyes. 45 years ago, on this very beach, he'd been photographing the sunrise when he spotted me gathering these ocean-polished treasures for my sculptures. The sea gives us its most beautiful gifts after they've been broken, he'd said, helping me find a perfect cobalt piece. We were married 6 months later, and now, 11 years after his death, I found myself drawn back to this place on what would have been our golden anniversary. I'd told my children I needed closure, but truthfully, I just wanted to feel close to him again. The beach was nearly empty as sunset approached, most tourists already heading to restaurants or vacation rentals. That's when I saw him, a solitary figure on the large, flat rock that Jonathan had always claimed as his photography throne. Same stance, one knee slightly bent, camera held with that distinctive grip Jonathan had developed to compensate for his old sailing injury. My heart stuttered. Grief plays cruel tricks on the mind. I knew that from experience, seeing Jonathan in crowds, hearing his laugh in restaurants, feeling his presence in our empty bed. This was just another phantom, another moment when my longing painted his image onto a stranger. But as the sun dipped lower, casting the beach in amber light, the man lowered his camera and turned. Our eyes met across the distance, and my world tilted on its axis. Jonathan, older, yes. Hair completely white now, not the salt and pepper I remembered. New lines carved around his eyes, a scar I didn't recognize tracing his left cheekbone, but unmistakably him, my husband, the man whose broken body I had identified, the man whose ashes I had scattered into these very waters. My legs moved without conscious thought, carrying me toward the rock. Part of me expected him to vanish with each step, a mirage dissolving as I approached. But he remained, standing perfectly still, watching me with those sea-green eyes I'd never thought I'd see again. Jonathan? My voice was barely audible above the waves, shaky and thin. He didn't speak. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his weathered jacket and withdrew a small envelope and what appeared to be an old brass key. His hand, when it extended toward mine, was solid and warm, not the cold touch of a ghost, but living flesh. The note inside contained just one sentence in the handwriting I'd know anywhere. Nem tudo o que você acreditou era verdade. Lighthouse Point, amanhã, 6 a.m., onde encontramos o primeiro vidro azul. Not everything you believed was true. Lighthouse Point, tomorrow, 6 a.m., where we found the first blue glass. I looked up, questions flooding my mind like the incoming tide, but he was already walking away, his silhouette dark against the setting sun. Wait, I called, stumbling forward. Jonathan, he paused, half-turned. For a moment, I thought he might come back, might explain everything right there on the beach. Instead, he shook his head once and said, "Tomorrow, Claire. Please, it's not safe here." Then he disappeared around the rocky outcropping that marked the beach's northern boundary, leaving me clutching a cryptic note, an unknown key, and the shattered pieces of everything I'd believed for 11 years. My husband was alive. My husband had let me believe he was dead. My husband wanted to meet me at the lighthouse where we'd had our first kiss. Tears blurred my vision as I stared at the note again. Not safe? What wasn't safe about a public beach? And why now, after 11 years of silence? I sank onto the sand, legs suddenly too weak to support me. The cool metal of the key pressed into my palm, leaving an impression, like Jonathan had left on my life, like his death had left on my soul. The rational part of my brain, the museum curator who'd spent decades cataloging and authenticating maritime artifacts, whispered that this could be a cruel trick, a doppelganger, a con. Perhaps I should call Michael or Emma, tell them what happened, ask for their advice. But my children had finally moved forward with their lives after years of grief. Michael had only recently stopped having nightmares about his father drowning. Emma had named her firstborn Jonathan just last year, a tribute to the grandfather her son would never meet. No, I couldn't upend their healing with this impossible encounter until I knew more. As darkness fell over Rockport Beach, I made my decision. Tomorrow at dawn, I would go to Lighthouse Point. I would hear what Jonathan had to say, and then I would decide whether the man I had loved for 50 years deserved my forgiveness or my fury. Because one thing was already clear: the Jonathan Sullivan I had married would never have put me through 11 years of grief without an extraordinary reason. Tomorrow, I would discover what that reason was. Sleep eluded me that night in my small rented cottage overlooking the harbor. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jonathan's face, older but unmistakably him, looking at me with a mixture of longing and fear. I replayed our brief encounter 1,000 times, analyzing each detail like one of the ancient maps I'd spent my career preserving. By 5:30 a.m., I'd given up on rest. I dressed carefully, choosing sturdy shoes for the rocky path to the lighthouse and a warm jacket against the dawn chill. The brass key sat heavy in my pocket, its purpose still a mystery. Before leaving, I left a sealed envelope on the kitchen table addressed to Michael, detailing where I'd gone and why, just in case this meeting wasn't what it seemed. Lighthouse Point stood on the northernmost tip of Rockport, accessible only by a narrow path winding along steep cliffs. Jonathan and I had discovered it during our first summer together, claiming it as our spot, away from tourists and locals alike. It was here, at the base of the abandoned lighthouse keeper's cottage, that we'd found an exquisite piece of cobalt sea glass, polished to perfection by decades in the ocean. Jonathan had later set it in silver as my engagement pendant, a necklace I still wore every day, even now. The sky was just beginning to lighten as I climbed the familiar path, my breath coming harder than it had in my younger days. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp against the rumble of waves below. The lighthouse itself hadn't operated in decades, its beacon long since automated and moved to a modern tower half a mile down the coast. What remained was a crumbling stone structure and the keeper's cottage, both supposedly sealed against trespassers. As I rounded the final bend, I saw him. Jonathan stood at the edge of the cliff, camera around his neck as always, gazing out at the horizon where pink and gold had begun to stain the eastern sky. The rising light caught his profile, and for a moment, I was transported back 45 years to when I first saw him, young and vibrant, capturing the dawn with his lens. He turned as I approached, his face solemn. Neither of us spoke immediately, the weight of 11 years of separation hanging between us like sea fog. "You came," he finally said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you would. I feared you wouldn't." He gestured to the cottage behind him. "We should go inside. We can't be seen together out here." "Why?" I demanded, keeping my distance. "Why the secrecy? Why 11 years of letting me think you were dead? Our children, Jonathan. They mourned you. We all did." Pain flashed across his features. "I know, and I'll explain everything, I promise, but not out in the open." He glanced nervously down the path I'd climbed. "Please, Claire, it's not just my life at stake anymore. It's yours too, now that we've been seen together." "Seen by whom?" Instead of answering, he walked to the cottage door, its weathered wood gray with age and salt. "The key I gave you. It opens this." My hand trembled slightly as I withdrew the brass key from my pocket. It fit perfectly into the rusted lock, turning with surprising ease, as if the mechanism had been recently oiled. The door swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. Jonathan stepped aside, allowing me to enter first. The interior was not the abandoned ruin I expected, but a sparse yet livable space. A table, 2 chairs, a small kitchenette, and what appeared to be communications equipment on a desk by the window. Maps covered one wall, with red strings connecting various points. Photographs, surveillance images, were pinned beside them. "Welcome to my occasional home for the past 11 years, Jonathan said, closing and bolting the door behind us. "One of them, anyway." "What is all this?" I asked, moving closer to examine the wall of maps and photos. "Evidence." He joined me, pointing to a central image of a sleek yacht. "That's Victor Crowley's vessel, the Poseidon's Wrath. And that man?" He indicated an older gentleman in an expensive suit. "Is Crowley himself, the shipping magnate? What does he have to do with this? With you abandoning your family?" Jonathan's shoulders sagged. "Everything. He's the reason I had to disappear." He pulled out a chair for me. "Please sit. This is a long story, and we don't have much time." I remained standing. 11 years, Jonathan. You owe me more than a chair and cryptic explanations." "You're right." He ran a hand through his white hair, a gesture so achingly familiar it made my heart contract. I never wanted to leave you, Claire. You have to believe that. But when I discovered what Crowley was involved in, when he threatened you and the kids, I had no choice. Threatened us? How? Remember that accident where you were nearly hit by a car outside the museum? Michael's brake failure that same year? Emma's food poisoning at Crowley's restaurant? Cold dread spread through my chest. Those were just accidents. No, Jonathan's voice hardened. They were warnings. After Emma got sick, Crowley sent this to my studio. He pulled a photograph from a folder on the table and handed it to me. It showed me asleep in our bed, clearly taken from inside our bedroom. I felt violated just looking at it, remembering how I'd slept with the windows open that hot summer before Jonathan's death. He made it clear that next time, it wouldn't be a warning, Jonathan continued. And it was my fault. I'd gotten too close to something he'd killed to protect. The shipwreck, I whispered, pieces clicking into place. The siren's call. You'd been researching it for years. Jonathan nodded. What I didn't tell you was what I'd found. It wasn't just a historical curiosity, Claire. That ship was carrying 500 gold bars when it went down in 1917. Federal Reserve gold meant to finance the Allied forces in World War I, worth around 800 million in today's dollars. I sank into the chair he'd offered earlier, my legs suddenly weak. And you found it? I found where it really sank, not where the official records claim. And I discovered it wasn't a German torpedo that sank it. It was sabotage, he tapped Crowley's photo, by Victor's great-grandfather, who was first mate on that voyage. The Crowley family built their shipping empire on stolen gold they managed to salvage secretly over the years, but not all of it. And you were going to... what? Salvage it yourself? I was going to expose the truth, the historical truth, the criminal truth. Jonathan knelt before me, taking my hands in his. But when Crowley realized how close I was, when he started threatening our family, I had to make a choice. So you faked your death? Let us all believe you drowned? With help from Tom Morrison. Remember him? My old Navy SEAL friend? I nodded, and Jonathan continued. We staged the accident, made it look real enough that Crowley would believe it, used a body from the morgue with similar build, falsified dental records. My mind reeled with the implications. The funeral, the body we buried, not mine. His grip on my hands tightened. I'm so sorry, Claire. Watching you grieve, not being able to tell you I was alive, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But as long as Crowley believed I was dead, as long as he thought my research died with me, you were safe. The kids were safe. For 11 years, you've been what? Hiding? Watching us from afar? Gathering evidence, building a case against Crowley and his entire network. They're involved in everything from smuggling to money laundering for cartels. He stood, going to the wall of evidence. I've lived as Daniel Waters, a fisherman in Maine, kept tabs on you through Tom, continued my research in secret. Why now? I asked, the central question finally surfacing. Why come back now after all this time? Jonathan's expression darkened. Because Crowley's dying. Terminal cancer, 6 months at most. He's desperate to recover the rest of the gold before he dies, to secure his son's inheritance. He's hired mercenaries to force you to reveal anything I might have left behind. Me? But I don't know anything. He doesn't believe that. And he's right, in a way. Jonathan moved to a loose floorboard, prying it up to reveal a hidden compartment. From it, he withdrew a folder. I left clues, Claire. Pieces of the map to the siren's call's true location, hidden in items that only you would recognize as significant. What items? I demanded, a new anger rising. I don't remember finding anything unusual. Because you weren't looking. He opened the folder, revealing photographs. The first clue is in the frame of the first photograph we ever sold together. The wood itself. I carved coordinates into the inner edge. The second is in the pages of the poetry book I gave you when I proposed. The third is encoded in our family album photos using steganography, hidden data in the images themselves. The fourth is on the back of your painting of this lighthouse that hangs in our bedroom. And the fifth, he smiled faintly. The fifth is engraved inside the bell from our old sailboat. I stared at him, incredulous. You hid a treasure map in pieces around our house? Without telling me? What if I'd gotten rid of those things after you died? You wouldn't. His certainty irritated me. Those items meant too much to you. To us. You had no right, I whispered, anger finally breaking through the shock. No right to make that decision for all of us. to let us suffer. I had every right to protect my family, he countered, his own anger flaring. Crowley would have killed you all, Claire. This wasn't a game. And now? What happens now? We have 72 hours before Crowley's men come for you. Tom intercepted their communications. We need to gather the family, retrieve all the map pieces, and find the gold before they do. The gold? I laughed bitterly. That's what this is about? Treasure? No, Jonathan said firmly. It's about evidence. The gold shipment wasn't the only thing on that vessel. There were documents, waterproof, preserved documents that prove the conspiracy. Documents that implicate not just the Crowleys, but dozens of powerful families who've built empires on blood money. This is bigger than us, Claire. I stood, needing space between us. You expect me to just, what, forgive you? Help you? Bring our children into danger? They're already in danger. Crowley's men will come for them too, thinking they might know something. He approached me cautiously. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but this isn't just about us anymore. It's about justice, about finally ending this so we can all be safe. I looked into the face of the man I'd loved for half a century, the man I'd mourned for over a decade. Anger, betrayal, relief, and love warred within me. You're asking me to trust you, I said finally, after you broke that trust in the most fundamental way possible. Yes, he didn't flinch from the accusation. I am. The first full rays of sunrise streamed through the cottage window, illuminating the wall of evidence. Years of Jonathan's secret work. Outside, the waves crashed against the rocks below, constant and unchanging despite the turmoil in this small room. I need time, I said. Time to process this. We don't have much, he reminded me gently. Crowley's men will be watching your rental by tonight, if they aren't already. I touched the sea glass pendant at my throat, the first gift Jonathan had ever given me. You said there were 5 map pieces. How do we get them all in 72 hours? Some are in our house in Gloucester. A small smile touched Jonathan's lips. So, you're considering helping me? I'm considering keeping our children safe, I corrected, though we both heard the unspoken acknowledgement in my words. That doesn't mean I've forgiven you. I understand. He reached for his camera, pressing a button to reveal it wasn't a camera at all, but a sophisticated communication device. Tom? She's in. Make the calls. I raised an eyebrow. In. I didn't say... You didn't have to. Jonathan's eyes, those sea-green eyes I dreamed about for 11 lonely years, held mine. I still know you, Claire Sullivan, better than anyone. And despite everything, despite the rage and hurt and betrayal, I couldn't deny the truth in his words, or the fact that my traitorous heart leapt at hearing him say my name again. The lighthouse keeper's cottage suddenly seemed very small, and the 72 hours ahead stretched like an ocean between us, vast, unpredictable, and filled with both promise and peril. The drive to my son's charter boat business took 40 minutes, every second filled with tense silence. Jonathan sat beside me in my rental car, his presence simultaneously foreign and achingly familiar. Occasionally I caught him studying my profile, his eyes tracing the new lines time had etched around my eyes, the silver threading my once auburn hair. You're still beautiful, he said quietly as we approached the harbor. Don't, I warned, gripping the steering wheel tighter. You don't get to compliment me after what you did. He nodded, accepting my rebuke without argument. Michael's business has done well, he observed as we pulled into the parking lot of Sullivan Charters. The sight of my son's accomplishment, a thriving business with a fleet of 3 boats and a handsome office overlooking Gloucester Harbor, would normally fill me with pride. Today it filled me with dread. How would Michael react to seeing his father alive after 11 years? Let me go in first, I suggested, putting the car in park. Prepare him. There's no preparation for this, Claire, Jonathan said gently. But you're right. It might be easier coming from you initially. I found Michael in his office, bent over navigation charts, his dark hair, so like Jonathan's had once been, falling over his forehead as he plotted routes. At 44, my son had his father's build and love for the sea, but my practicality and caution. Mom? He looked up, surprised. I thought you were still in Rockport. Everything okay? How to answer that question? Everything was simultaneously more okay and more terribly wrong than it had been in 11 years. Michael, I began, closing his office door. Something's happened, something impossible. My voice caught. Your father is alive, his face drained of color. What are you talking about? He faked his death to protect us, he says. The words sounded ridiculous even as I spoke them. He's here, Michael, outside. He wants to see you. My son's expression hardened into something I'd rarely seen. Pure, cold fury. This is a sick joke, Mom. Dad's been gone 11 years. We scattered his ashes. I know how it sounds. I didn't believe it either until I took a deep breath. He's really here, Michael. Before I could stop him, he pushed past me, flinging open the office door and storming into the parking lot. I hurried after him, heart hammering against my ribs. Jonathan stood leaning against my car, straightening when he saw his son approaching. Michael, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Son. Michael stopped a few paces away, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit his father. Instead, he asked one question. Why? In the next 20 minutes, Jonathan gave Michael the condensed version of what he'd told me at the lighthouse, the siren's call, Victor Crowley's threats, the faked death, the 11 years in hiding. With each revelation, Michael's expression shifted from disbelief to horror to a confused mix of anger and relief. The brake failure, he said finally, when I nearly drove off the causeway. That wasn't an accident? Jonathan shook his head. Crowley's warning. After that, I knew I had to disappear to keep you all safe. So you let us think you were dead? Michael's voice cracked. Do you have any idea what that did to us? To Mom? To Emma? To me? I do, Jonathan replied, and I could see the genuine pain in his eyes. I watched from afar. It gutted me, Michael. But you were alive to suffer, rather than dead if I'd stayed. Michael ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture so like his father's that my heart twisted. Jesus Christ, he muttered. And now this Crowley guy is coming after us again? After 11 years? His mercenaries, yes. We have just under 72 hours. We need to call the police, Michael insisted. Jonathan shook his head firmly. Crowley has half the local force on his payroll. Has for decades. The FBI then. Without proof, it's just the word of a man who's legally been dead for 11 years. Michael paced, processing everything. Finally, he looked at me. You believe all this, Mom? About the treasure, the conspiracy, all of it? I hesitated. I believe your father thinks we're in danger, I said carefully. And right now, that's enough for me to listen. We need to get Emma, Michael decided abruptly. If what Dad says is true, she's in danger too. Jonathan nodded. Tom's already reaching out through secure channels. She should be at her research facility today. The Marine Conservation Center, Michael confirmed. Tuesday is her lab day. He glanced between us. I'll call her. Tell her we're coming. But Dad, you should wait in the car when we get there. Let us explain first. Of course. As we prepared to leave, Michael pulled me aside. Are you okay? He asked quietly. It's insane, Mom. I squeezed his arm. I'm still processing. But having you here helps. I'm furious with him, Michael confessed. But also glad he's alive, I finished for him. I know. Me too. The Marine Conservation Center where Emma worked was 30 minutes north along the coast. During the drive, Michael called his sister, telling her only that there was a family emergency and we needed to see her immediately. She's worried, he reported after hanging up. Thinks something's happened to one of us. Something did happen, Jonathan murmured from the back seat. I came back from the dead. When we arrived, Emma was waiting anxiously outside the modern glass building that housed her research facility. At 40, my daughter had blossomed into a confident woman, her work in marine conservation earning her international recognition. Her pregnancy with her second child was just beginning to show beneath her lab coat. Michael approached her first, while Jonathan and I waited in the car. She's pregnant, Jonathan observed, his voice catching. I'm going to be a grandfather again. You already are, I reminded him sharply. Her son Jonathan is almost 1 year old, named for the grandfather she thought was dead. Pain flashed across his features. Claire, Don't, I interrupted. Just don't apologize again. It doesn't change anything. Outside, we could see Michael talking intently, Emma's expression morphing from concern to disbelief. She shook her head vehemently, then looked toward our car. When she spotted Jonathan in the back seat, she staggered slightly, Michael catching her elbow to steady her. I should go to her, I said, reaching for the door handle. Before I could exit, Emma was marching toward the car, her face a storm of emotions. She yanked open the back door, staring at her father with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Dad?" she whispered, the single word containing 11 years of grief. Jonathan stepped out slowly, as if afraid sudden movements might shatter this fragile moment. "Emma," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "My beautiful girl." Unlike Michael's restrained anger, Emma's reaction was immediate and physical. She flung herself into her father's arms, sobbing against his chest. Jonathan held her tightly, his own tears flowing freely as he stroked her hair, still auburn like mine had once been. "You were dead," she kept saying. "We buried you. I named my son after you." "I know," he soothed. "I know, sweetheart, and I can never make up for what I put you through. But I did it to protect you all, to keep you safe." Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Michael says we're in danger. That's why you've come back now." Jonathan nodded grimly. "We don't have much time to explain everything. Can you take a few days away from work? We need somewhere safe to talk, to plan." "Plan what?" Emma asked. "How to survive the next 72 hours, Michael answered, joining us. "And maybe, if Dad's right, how to expose a century-old conspiracy." Emma looked between us, her scientific mind clearly struggling with the fantastical nature of our situation. "This is crazy," she said finally. "But it's really you, isn't it, Dad?" Jonathan smiled, that crooked half-smile I'd fallen in love with decades ago. "It's really me, Emmy." My daughter took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders in that determined way she'd had since childhood. "I need to make arrangements for my lab work. Let my husband know I'll be away." She touched her slightly rounded belly. "Daniel will worry, but family emergency covers it, I suppose." As Emma went inside to make her calls, Michael pulled Jonathan and me aside. "Where do we go now? We can't use any of our homes or usual places if these mercenaries are really coming." "Tom has arranged a safe house," Jonathan replied. "About 2 hours inland. Remote cabin, defensible position, stocked with supplies." "Tom Morrison," Michael mused. "Your old Navy SEAL buddy. The one who sent flowers every year on the anniversary of your death. He was in on this the whole time?" Jonathan nodded. "He's the only one who knew. The only one I could trust without putting you all at risk." "The insurance money," I said suddenly, a new realization dawning. "The $3 million policy payout that helped us after you were gone. That didn't come from the insurance company, did it?" "No," Jonathan admitted. "It came from Tom. From funds I'd set aside before my death. I couldn't leave you with nothing, Claire." Another lie, another deception. Even if it had been meant to help us. How many more would I discover in the coming days? As Emma returned, her face set in determined lines despite her red-rimmed eyes, I wondered what other revelations awaited our fractured family, and whether any of us would survive the next 72 hours with our relationships or our lives intact. The drive to the safe house was tense with unspoken questions. Emma sat beside me in the back seat, occasionally touching my hand as if to reassure herself I was real. Michael drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Jonathan navigated from the passenger seat. Every few minutes he checked a small device that looked like a smartphone, but clearly wasn't. "Perimeter scanner," he explained when he caught me watching in the rearview mirror. "Alerts us if we're being followed." "Are we?" Emma asked nervously. "Not yet, but we need to get the map pieces before going to the safe house." Jonathan turned to address all of us. "Two are at the Gloucester house, the frame and the poetry book. My home, our home, where I'd lived alone for 11 years, where I'd mourned him, cried myself to sleep clutching his sweater, learned to exist in half a life. Mom's been watched before," Michael pointed out. "Won't they be monitoring her house?" "Almost certainly," Jonathan agreed. "Which is why Claire can't go. It would trigger immediate interest." "Then who?" I began. "I'll go," Emma interrupted. "I have a key, and I visit Mom often enough that it won't seem suspicious." I shook my head. "No, you're pregnant, Emma. I won't put you in that kind of danger." "I'll do it," Michael decided. "I help with Mom's maintenance projects. It's normal for me to stop by." Jonathan nodded. "You'll need to know exactly what you're looking for." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, flipping it open to a hand-drawn sketch. "The first photograph we sold, the lighthouse at dawn. It's in your study, Claire, over the small desk. The frame has a false inner edge. You need to remove the backing and pry off the decorative inner molding. The coordinates are carved into the wood underneath." "And the poetry book?" Michael asked. "Tennyson, Crossing the Bar, the blue leather edition on your mother's bedside table. Jonathan's voice softened. You still keep it there, Claire? I looked away, unwilling to admit how I'd slept with that book near me every night since his death, finding comfort in the inscription he'd written when proposing. To my North Star, guiding me home through every storm. It's there, I confirmed quietly. What am I looking for in it? Not you. Michael, Jonathan corrected gently. And he needs to check pages 17, 33, and 42. I used a microdot technique. Tiny dots of ink that, when aligned properly, form a section of nautical map. You'll need a magnifying glass to see them properly. What about the family album and the painting? Emma asked. And the bell? The album and painting are at the Gloucester house too. The bell? Jonathan hesitated. The bell is in storage, isn't it, Claire? With my other sailing equipment? I nodded. Marina storage unit. I couldn't bear to see it every day, but couldn't let it go either. Another painful reminder of our shared past. The vintage brass bell from our first sailboat. The vessel we'd restored together early in our marriage. We'll need all 5 pieces to complete the map, Jonathan continued. Michael can get the frame, book, album, and painting. But the storage unit would look suspicious. You haven't visited it in years. I have, Michael admitted. I go sometimes, sit with Dad's things. Jonathan's expression softened with pain. Michael, Don't, my son cut him off. We need to focus on the task at hand. I'll get all 5 pieces, but first, I want to know the whole story. Everything you've been doing for 11 years. And why you couldn't find another way, Emma added, her initial joy at seeing her father alive, now tempered with questions. Why you couldn't tell us, at least. Jonathan exchanged a glance with me. We have a 2-hour drive ahead. I suppose it's time for the complete truth. As we continued toward the safe house, Jonathan filled in the blanks of his double life. How he'd spent the first year after his death in deep isolation in northern Maine, terrified of being recognized. How Tom had helped him establish his new identity as Daniel Waters, complete with falsified background and documentation. How he'd gradually built a life as a reclusive fisherman while secretly continuing his research into the Siren's Call and the Crowley family's crimes. The shipwreck research was just the beginning, he explained. Once I started digging into Victor Crowley's past, I uncovered a network of corruption spanning generations. Smuggling during Prohibition, arms dealing during World War II, money laundering for cartels in the modern era. If he's so powerful, why hasn't he found the gold himself? Michael asked skeptically. He's got resources, connections. Because only I decoded the actual location, Jonathan said with a hint of pride. The official records are deliberately wrong, part of the original conspiracy to hide the theft. I spent 20 years triangulating the true coordinates using historical records, underwater current mapping, and astronomical alignments from ship's logs. And this is worth killing for? Emma pressed. After all this time? 800 million in gold? Absolutely. But it's not just the gold, Emma. It's what's with it. Jonathan leaned forward earnestly. The ship was carrying sealed diplomatic pouches, waterproof cases with documents that would expose not just the Crowley family's original crime, but an entire shadow network of powerful families who've built empires on blood money. Think of it as the Panama Papers of 1917, proof of who really controlled global finance during the war. And you believe these 100-year-old documents are still intact? Michael's skepticism was evident. The diplomatic pouches were cutting-edge technology for their time, specially treated leather with wax and rubber sealing. And the depth and cold water of the cavern where they've been, it's possible. More than possible. Jonathan's conviction was unwavering. If even half of those documents are legible, they'd rewrite history and destroy the Crowley family's legacy forever. We fell silent as the implications sank in. Jonathan had sacrificed 11 years of his life and ours for this cause, for justice against a powerful man who'd threatened his family, for historical truth, for what he believed was right. Part of me understood. Part of me would never forgive him. We're here, Jonathan announced as Michael turned onto a barely visible dirt road winding through dense forest. Tom's safe house. The cabin was more substantial than I'd expected. A solid 2-story structure built of heavy logs with small defensible windows and a metal roof. It sat in a small clearing, backed against a rocky hillside with clear sightlines to the approaching road. As we pulled up, the front door opened, revealing a man I recognized despite the passing years. Tom Morrison, still powerfully built in his 60s, his military bearing unchanged, though his dark hair had silvered at the temples. The man who'd delivered Jonathan's eulogy at the funeral. The man who'd checked on us periodically throughout the years. The man who'd known all along that my husband was alive. Claire, he greeted me solemnly as I exited the car. I can't imagine what you must think of me. You lied at my husband's funeral, I replied coldly. Spoke of his courage, his sacrifice, made us all weep with your stories. Every word about his courage and sacrifice was true, Tom said quietly. The only lie was that he died demonstrating those qualities. Before I could respond, his attention shifted to Michael and Emma. You've grown into fine adults, he told them. Your father watched your accomplishments from afar, with immense pride. You helped him abandon us, Michael accused. Tom didn't flinch from the accusation. I helped him save you, he corrected. If you'd seen the surveillance photos, the threats Crowley made, you wouldn't question his decision. We need to see those, Emma said firmly. All the evidence, everything that justified 11 years of separation. Inside, Jonathan urged, scanning the forest edge nervously. We're exposed out here. The cabin's interior was spartanly furnished but well-equipped. A large table dominated the main room, covered with maps and surveillance equipment. One wall held weapons, rifles, handguns, even what appeared to be military-grade gear. Another displayed the same complex web of photos and connections I'd seen in the lighthouse cottage, but expanded significantly. Welcome to Operation Siren, Tom said, securing the door behind us. 11 years of intelligence gathering, evidence collection, and preparation. Preparation for what? I asked. Jonathan and Tom exchanged glances. For going public with everything, Jonathan answered. The original crime, the Crowley family's century of corruption, the network of powerful people who've benefited. And for protecting you all when that happens, Tom added grimly. The kind of people we're dealing with don't surrender power willingly. As we gathered around the table, Tom activated a computer display showing a detailed timeline. We have approximately 68 hours before Crowley's mercenaries make their move on Claire, he explained. Michael needs to retrieve the map pieces from Gloucester tonight. Meanwhile, we prepare for the expedition to the cavern. Expedition? Emma echoed. You mean we're actually going after this treasure? We have to, Jonathan said. It's the only way to secure the evidence we need. And we can only access the cavern during a specific tidal window that occurs once a month. The next opportunity is in 3 days. This is insane, Michael muttered, running a hand through his hair. We're not treasure hunters or spies. No, Jonathan agreed. But I've spent 11 years becoming both, and Tom has the military expertise we need. He looked at each of us in turn. I know this is overwhelming. I know you're angry, confused, hurt. But right now, we need to focus on survival, on finishing this so we can all have our lives back, as if we could simply return to normal after this. As if 11 years of grief and absence could be erased by reunion and explanation. Looking at my children's faces, Michael's skeptical determination, Emma's conflicted hope, I realized that whatever happened in the coming days, our family would never be the same. Too much had been lost, too many lies told, too many years wasted. And yet, as Jonathan spread out nautical charts of the coastline, tracing the probable location of the shipwreck with hands I'd once known as intimately as my own, I felt a traitorous spark of the connection that had bound us for decades. This brilliant, maddening man had shattered my world twice now, first by dying and then by returning. The question that remained was whether anything of value could be salvaged from the wreckage of our past. Like the sea glass we'd once collected together, perhaps something beautiful might eventually emerge from what had been broken. But first, we had to survive the storm that was coming. Darkness had settled over the forest by the time Michael prepared to leave for Gloucester. He'd changed into nondescript dark clothing provided by Tom, and now stood examining a small communication device, a modified earpiece that would keep him in constant contact. 3 hours maximum, Tom instructed, checking the clip on a handgun before offering it to my son. In and out. No detours. Michael stared at the weapon. I've never fired a gun. And with luck, you won't have to tonight, Tom replied. But Crowley's people are professionals. If they spot you, you'll need more than luck. Watching my son reluctantly accept the pistol, I felt a surge of protective fury. This is insane, I protested. He's a charter boat captain, not a secret agent. There has to be another way. There isn't, Jonathan said quietly. Michael knows the house. He can move through it naturally if someone's watching. A stranger would trigger immediate suspicion. Then I'll go, I insisted. It's my house. Precisely why you can't, Tom countered. The moment you return to Gloucester, they'll assume you've gone for the map pieces. Michael's presence is routine maintenance, something he's done regularly for years. The logic was sound, but it did nothing to calm my fear. I approached Michael, straightening the collar of his jacket, a motherly gesture that seemed absurdly normal in this surreal situation. Be careful, I whispered. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, I'll abort the mission, he promised, using Tom's military terminology with a hint of dark humor. Don't worry, Mom. I grew up in that house. I know every creaky floorboard. Emma hugged her brother fiercely. Check in every 15 minutes, she instructed. Even if it's just a click on the communication line. Michael nodded, then turned to Jonathan. For a moment, father and son regarded each other awkwardly, 11 years of absence stretching between them. The frame first, Jonathan said finally, professional rather than paternal. Then the book, album and painting last. They're less crucial if you need to evacuate quickly. The bell can wait if necessary. I'll get them all, Michael assured him, his tone equally detached. Whatever reconciliation might come between them clearly wouldn't happen tonight. As Tom led Michael outside to the nondescript sedan he'd use for the mission, I found myself alone with Jonathan and Emma in the cabin's main room. He'll be okay, Emma said, though whether she was reassuring me or herself wasn't clear. Michael's always been capable, Jonathan agreed. Even as a boy, he had that steady focus. You don't get to reminisce, I snapped, the fear for my son sharpening my words. You gave up that right when you let us think you were dead for 11 years. Jonathan accepted the rebuke without argument. After a moment, he turned to the wall of evidence, gesturing for us to join him. While we wait, you should see what I've uncovered. The full scope of what we're dealing with. The extensive display was overwhelming. Photographs, documents, maps, all connected with red string and annotated in Jonathan's precise handwriting. At the center was Victor Crowley, a distinguished-looking man in his 70s with steel-gray hair and cold eyes. Crowley Shipping controls 40% of the eastern seaboard's cargo traffic, Jonathan explained. Legitimate business on the surface, but beneath, he pointed to various connections radiating outward. Drug smuggling routes, human trafficking networks, arms dealing, money laundering operations for at least 3 major cartels. How did you discover all this? Emma asked, her scientific mind clearly engaged despite her emotional turmoil. Slowly, methodically, starting with historical records of the Siren's Call and working forward through generations of Crowley operations. Jonathan indicated a timeline running along the bottom of the display. The family pattern became clear. Strategic marriages to consolidate power, elimination of competitors through accidents, blackmail of officials for favorable regulations. And no one's ever exposed them? I questioned skeptically. Those who tried suffered unfortunate fates. Jonathan tapped several obituary clippings pinned to the board. 3 journalists, a Coast Guard investigator, 2 rival shipping executives, all ruled accidents or natural causes. A chill ran through me as I recognized a name. Harold Winters, the maritime historian? I'd attended his funeral 7 years ago. A heart attack while swimming, colleagues had said. He found partial records of the Siren's Call's true manifest, Jonathan confirmed grimly. Started asking questions. Died the next week. Emma had moved to another section of the display, studying what appeared to be surveillance photos of a young man who resembled Crowley. Who's this? Marcus Crowley, Victor's son, Harvard Business School, groomed to take over the empire. Jonathan's expression shifted subtly. But possibly our unexpected ally. Ally? I echoed in disbelief. The son of the man who's hunting us? Marcus may not share his father's ruthlessness, Jonathan explained. He's been questioning certain aspects of the family business, making changes in operations that have angered Victor. Based on communications we've intercepted, there's significant tension between them. You're banking our safety on family dysfunction? The irony wasn't lost on me. Not banking on it, but aware it might be leveraged if necessary. Jonathan turned as Tom re-entered the cabin. Michael's on his way? Tom nodded, moving to the communication station. ETA to Gloucester, 45 minutes. No tail detected. He activated several monitors, showing what appeared to be security camera feeds. I've hacked into the surveillance cameras near your house, Claire. No obvious watchers, but they'd be discreet. As we gathered around the monitors, I felt Emma's arm slip around my waist. My daughter, always the peacemaker, offering comfort while processing her own complex emotions. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "there's something I need to know." When Jonathan turned to her, she continued, "You said earlier that you watched us from afar over the years. What did that mean exactly?" Jonathan exchanged a glance with Tom, who nodded slightly. "I was there," he admitted softly. "At a distance, disguised, but there. For Michael's wedding, your PhD graduation, the opening of Michael's charter business." His voice caught. "I stood at the back of the church when you married Daniel. Saw you walk down the aisle in your mother's veil." Emma's grip on my waist tightened. "You were at my wedding? And didn't say anything?" I couldn't risk it. Not then. Pain etched deep lines around Jonathan's eyes. Watching your lives from a distance, it was both sustenance and torture. "You could have found a way to tell us," I insisted. "A message, a sign, something to ease our grief." "Any contact would have put you in danger," Tom interjected. "The surveillance on your family was intermittent but thorough. Crowley's people watched for years, expecting Jonathan might reach out." "The photos," Jonathan added, pulling a folder from beneath the maps. "These were taken by Crowley's surveillance team." He spread several photographs on the table. Me leaving the museum where I'd worked, Michael on his boat, Emma in her university lab, all of us at Jonathan's memorial service on the 5th anniversary of his death. "They watched that closely? For years?" Emma whispered, visibly disturbed. "Crowley's paranoia worked in our favor," Tom explained. "He was so convinced Jonathan had hidden his research with one of you that he maintained surveillance long after most would have given up. Which is why my disappearance had to be absolute," Jonathan finished. "Why I couldn't risk even the smallest contact." Before I could respond, a soft beep came from the communication system. Tom activated the speaker. "Status check," came Michael's voice, slightly distorted by electronic encryption. "Reading you," Tom responded. "Position? 5 minutes from the house. No complications. Maintain schedule. Next check in 15. As the connection clicked off, Jonathan moved to a detailed floor plan of our Gloucester home pinned to a corkboard. "He'll enter through the side door, least visible from the street," he explained, tracing the route with his finger. "Study first for the frame, then upstairs for the book, album, and painting." "You've planned this down to the minute," I observed, not sure whether to be impressed or disturbed by the level of calculation. "I've had 11 years to consider every contingency," Jonathan replied simply. "Yet you never considered telling your family the truth," I countered, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Jonathan's eyes met mine, filled with a complicated mix of regret and conviction. "I considered it every day, Claire. Every single day." The simple statement hung in the air between us, neither apology nor justification, but something more complex, an acknowledgement of the impossible choice he'd made and its devastating consequences. The communication system beeped again. "Approaching the house," Michael reported. "Street is quiet. No visible surveillance. Proceed with caution," Tom instructed. "Remember, professionals wouldn't be obvious." For the next hour, we tracked Michael's progress through the house via his periodic status reports, each one increasing my anxiety despite their reassuring brevity. "Frame secured. Book located. Album in hand. Painting removed from wall." "He's doing well," Tom commented, checking his watch. "Ahead of schedule." "Now the storage unit," Jonathan said, studying a marina schematic. "That's the most exposed location. Limited exits, open sight lines." "Should we tell him to skip it?" Emma asked worriedly. "You said the bell was less critical." "All 5 pieces create redundancy," Jonathan explained. "With 3, we can approximate the location. With all 5, we get exact coordinates, depth, and cavern entrance orientation." "I'm not risking my son for navigational precision," I stated firmly. "We'll let Michael decide," Tom mediated. "He has the tactical situation awareness we don't." The communication system crackled to life. "House items secured," Michael reported. "Proceeding to marina storage." "Be advised," Tom responded. "Storage facility presents higher exposure risk. Optional objective only." A pause. "I'm getting all 5, came Michael's determined reply. "Dad didn't hide these pieces for 11 years for us to leave one behind." Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride at my son's resilience. Perhaps also a twinge of recognition. That same stubborn determination that had both attracted me to Jonathan and now complicated my feelings toward him. 20 minutes to marina, Michael updated. We'll maintain radio silence until arrival. As the connection went quiet, Emma moved to the window, staring out into the darkness. I still can't believe this is happening, she said softly. Yesterday, Dad was 11 years dead. Today, he's very much alive, and we're hunting for sunken treasure while being hunted ourselves. She turned back to face us. It feels like one of Dad's adventure novels. Except the danger is real, I reminded her, protective instinct flaring. And you shouldn't be here at all in your condition. The baby is fine, Mom, she assured me, one hand resting protectively on her slightly rounded belly. And I wouldn't be anywhere else right now. This is family. Family. The word hung in the air, its meaning simultaneously simple and impossibly complex in our current circumstances. What defined family? Shared blood? Shared history? Shared truth? For 11 years, our family narrative had been built on a fundamental lie, Jonathan's death. How could we reconstruct ourselves around this new reality? The communication system's urgent beep interrupted my thoughts. Possible tail, Michael reported tensely. Black SUV, 2 vehicles back. Maintaining consistent distance. Tom immediately straightened, all casual demeanor vanishing. Change route. Use evasion pattern Delta. Executing now. We gathered around the communication system. Tension thick in the air as we listened to Michael's controlled breathing and the sound of the car accelerating. Still following. Definite tail. Michael's voice remained remarkably steady. Moving to secondary extraction route. Negative, Tom countered sharply. Too isolated. Maintain public roads. Head toward police station. They've accelerated. Closing distance. Jonathan gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Michael, abort the marina. Return directly to safe house. A screech of tires came through the speaker, followed by Michael's terse update. Attempting to evade. Second vehicle now involved. Black sedan, coming from side street. They're boxing him in, Tom muttered, already moving toward the door. I'm going for backup extraction. No time, Michael replied, his breathing heavier now. Taking alternative action. What alternative? I demanded, leaning toward the microphone. Michael, don't do anything reckless. Marina's 2 minutes away. Going for the bell now, then off-grid escape route. Negative, Jonathan barked. Too exposed. Trust me, Michael shot back. I know these waters better than they do. The connection went silent. Michael? I called urgently. Michael! Tom adjusted frequencies, trying to re-establish contact. He's disabled his transmitter, he reported grimly. Standard evasion tactic. You taught my son evasion tactics? I rounded on Jonathan accusingly. Not me, he replied, looking equally concerned. I did, Tom admitted. Last year, Michael sought me out, asked about maritime security against pirates. He was running charters in potentially dangerous waters. I gave him some basics. And didn't think to mention this earlier? I demanded. It didn't seem relevant until now. I paced the room, fear constricting my chest. We need to help him, to do something. Tom will go for extraction, Jonathan decided. I'll monitor communications. Claire, Emma, prepare the medical supplies, just in case. As Tom armed himself and headed for the door, the communication system suddenly crackled back to life. Package secured, came Michael's voice, breathless but triumphant. Pursuit evaded. New extraction point required. Relief flooded through me, so powerful my knees nearly buckled. Emma grabbed my arm, steadying me. Status? Tom demanded, pausing at the threshold. Uninjured, all items secured. Used the charter boat emergency protocol. Currently mobile on water. Tom and Jonathan exchanged a look of surprised respect. The Marina emergency escape plan, Jonathan realized. He used his charter boat. Clever boy, Tom acknowledged. Water egress is always cleaner than land. As they coordinated a new extraction point with Michael, I sank into a chair, emotional exhaustion washing over me. My son was safe, for now. He'd secured the map pieces that might lead us to the evidence Jonathan had sacrificed 11 years pursuing. But we were still in danger, still hunted, still fractured by secrets and time. Emma sat beside me, taking my hand. He's okay, Mom. Michael's always been the resourceful one. I know, I whispered. I can't lose any of you. Not again. Not even Jonathan, I realized, with a jolt of confused emotion. Despite everything, despite the anger and betrayal, the thought of losing him a second time was unbearable. What did that say about me? About the bond that had somehow survived 11 years of his deception? I didn't know. Perhaps I never would. All I knew was that my family, broken, imperfect, miraculous, was together for the first time in over a decade. And I would do whatever necessary to keep us that way, regardless of what the coming days might bring. The dining hall stunned me. Our old barn, where we'd once stored hay and farm equipment, had been transformed into a warm, welcoming space with long wooden tables, a stone fireplace, and walls covered with artwork, clearly created by the children who lived here. Wooden beams stretched overhead, strung with twinkling lights that gave the cavernous space an intimate feel. James designed it himself, Maggie explained as we entered. Said every family deserves a proper dinner table. A dozen round tables filled the space, each set with mismatched but clean plates and silverware. Residents were already gathering, adults helping children get settled, teenagers distributing water pitchers. The atmosphere was lively but organized, like a well-rehearsed dance where everyone knew their role. Michael, Jennifer, and I stood awkwardly just inside the entrance, outsiders in a place that bore our family name. David had yet to return from the stables. A tiny woman with snow-white hair approached us, leaning heavily on a cane. "You must be Eleanor," she said, her rheumatoid twisted hands extending toward mine. "I'm Rose. James spoke of you constantly." I took her gnarled fingers gently. "You're Thomas's mother." "Yes," she smiled, revealing dimples that matched her son's. "And James's second cousin, though he didn't know that when he found us. Only discovered the connection when I mentioned my maiden name was Mitchell, from the Kentucky Mitchells, not the Montana ones." I blinked in surprise. James never told me. Probably thought it didn't matter. Family is who you choose, not just who shares your blood. She gestured toward a table near the fireplace. "That's our family table. James always sat there when he visited. Would you join me?" Before I could answer, Michael stepped forward. "Mrs. Just Rose, dear. Rose," he continued stiffly. "I understand you've lived here for some time, but you should know this property is being sold. Tomorrow." Rose's smile never faltered. "Is that so? Well, perhaps after dinner you'll feel differently. Food has a way of changing perspectives." She turned back to me. "James's chair has been empty 6 months now. Would do my heart good to see it filled again." I felt Jennifer stiffen beside me, preparing legal arguments against emotional manipulation. But Rose wasn't manipulating. She was grieving, just as I was. "I'd be honored," I told her, ignoring Michael's disapproving look. We followed Rose to the table where Thomas was already seated, animatedly telling a teenage girl about Ben's brother who could talk to horses. David appeared moments later, sliding into the chair beside Thomas, a soft smile playing on his lips, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since James's funeral. "The mare's name is Whisper," he told me as I sat down. "Rescued from an abusive racing stable. She's going to be okay with time and patience." "Time and patience," Rose echoed. "James's prescription for all wounds, animal or human." A bell rang softly, and the dining hall quieted. Maggie stood at the front, hands clasped. "As always, before we eat, we share our gratitudes. Tonight is special, as we welcome Dr. Mitchell's family." A murmur went through the room as heads turned toward us. "Eleanor, Michael, Jennifer, and David have come to learn about the ranch. Let's show them the same kindness James showed each of us." One by one, people around the room stood to share brief thanksgivings. A veteran with a prosthetic leg thanked the community for helping with his physical therapy. A young mother expressed gratitude for childcare that allowed her to attend online classes. A teenage boy awkwardly thanked his math tutor for helping him pass an exam. When they finished, Thomas jumped up excitedly. "I'm grateful Ben's mommy came to see us, and his brother can talk to Whisper." All eyes turned expectantly toward me. I hadn't prepared for this ritual, had no gratitude readily available amid the whirlwind of revelations. But looking around at these faces, people whose lives James had touched while I remained oblivious, I found words. I'm grateful to discover that while I was preserving Benjamin's memory by keeping it locked away, James was honoring it by creating this. My voice caught. "Thank you for showing me another way to remember my son." A soft murmur of approval rippled through the room. Even Jennifer looked moved, though she quickly masked it when she caught Michael watching her. Rose squeezed my hand as dinner was served family style. Hearty vegetable stew, fresh bread, and salad greens that Maggie informed us came from the greenhouse. The meal was simple but delicious, clearly prepared with care. As we ate, residents stopped by our table to introduce themselves. Robert Winters, the lawyer I'd met earlier, shared stories of the ranch's early days. A former teacher named Elena described the educational program for children who struggled in traditional schools. A quiet man named Sammy, who I learned had been an interpreter for American forces in Afghanistan, expressed his gratitude for the sanctuary provided to his family when their special visas left them homeless in America. James paid for our immigration lawyer, Sammy said softly. When the system failed us, he created a place for us to belong while we fought for legal status. Michael remained silent throughout these interactions, though I noticed him watching a young boy at the next table who was eagerly showing a drawing to his mother. A stick figure family standing before a simple house, home, printed in wobbly letters above it. Jennifer, ever the attorney, asked pointed questions about the ranch's legal structure, funding mechanisms, and sustainability plans. Robert answered each inquiry with professional precision, occasionally referencing documents he promised to provide for her review. The mineral rights sale was legally structured as a charitable donation, he explained. The proceeds went directly into the trust's endowment fund, which is why it never appeared in personal accounts. Tax avoidance, Jennifer muttered. Tax planning, Robert corrected mildly. Perfectly legal and ethical. The IRS has audited the trust twice and found everything in order. David barely spoke, content to listen to Thomas's excited chatter about horses, swimming, and the art therapy classes he attended twice weekly. I watched my youngest son carefully. Of my 3 children, David had struggled most after Benjamin's death. Sleepwalking, nightmares, withdrawal. Just 7 when his brother drowned. He'd never fully processed the trauma. Now, watching him with Thomas, I glimpsed the healing that had eluded him. As dessert, Rose's famous apple pie was served. A young girl approached our table with a handmade card. Lucy, the redhead from the swimming lesson. I made this for you, she said shyly, placing it before me. Miss Maggie said you're sad because Dr. James went to heaven. The card featured a childish drawing of a smiling sun over a lake. Inside, in careful printing, when we are sad, Dr. James said to look for helpers. We can be your helpers now. Tears filled my eyes. James's favorite Mr. Rogers quote, "Look for the helpers," had become his life philosophy, it seemed. Thank you, Lucy, I managed. It's beautiful. As she skipped away, Michael finally broke his silence. This is all very touching, Mom, but these good works don't change the fact that Dad lied to us for decades, hid money, created this elaborate double life. While you were weekending in Aspen, David said suddenly, his voice unusually sharp. While Jennifer was climbing the corporate ladder, while I was in and out of rehab, Michael flushed. That's not fair, isn't it? David challenged. When's the last time you asked Dad about his life? Not about investments or advice or loans? Just about him? An uncomfortable silence fell over our table. Rose patted my hand gently. Family, she said softly. Always the most complicated love story. As dinner concluded, residents began their evening routines. Some cleared tables, others supervised children's homework. Still others gathered for what appeared to be a support group meeting in a corner. Typical evening at Mitchell Ranch, Maggie explained as she joined us. Everyone contributes according to their abilities. Everyone's needs are met according to their circumstances. Sounds like communism, Michael muttered. Sounds like family, I countered. And as I watched this community, these strangers united by James's vision, I realized they knew a side of my husband I'd never seen. While I'd been married to James Mitchell, family doctor and devoted husband, these people had known James Mitchell, visionary and savior. I wondered which version was more authentic, or if perhaps both were equally true. Night fell over the ranch, stars emerging in the vast Montana sky with a brilliance I'd forgotten existed in Denver's light-polluted suburbs. Maggie had offered us accommodations, Michael and Jennifer in guest rooms in the main house, David happily bunking in the stables at Thomas's insistent invitation, and me in James's quarters above his office. He kept a room here? I'd asked, surprised. For his longer visits, Maggie had explained. When he stayed several days to oversee construction projects or medical clinics, the space was undeniably James, Spartan but thoughtful in its details. A twin bed with the flannel sheets he preferred, bookshelves lined with medical journals and dog-eared westerns, a small desk beneath a window overlooking the property, and photographs, dozens of them, in simple frames covering one entire wall. I sat now on the edge of his bed, examining these snapshots of James's secret life. There he was with Robert, arms slung around each other's shoulders before a half-built cabin. James kneeling beside Thomas on a fishing dock. James in a Santa hat, distributing presents to beaming children. James beside a woman in a wheelchair, both grinning broadly as she held up a diploma. Not a single photograph of me or Michael, Jennifer, or David. Those lived in his Denver office, I realized. He had kept his worlds completely separate, not just for my protection, but perhaps for his own peace of mind. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Jennifer stood in the doorway, her professional demeanor slightly softened by exhaustion. "May I come in?" I nodded, patting the space beside me. She sat, her eyes immediately drawn to the photo wall. "It's surreal," she said after a moment, "like discovering Dad had another family." "He did, in a way," I acknowledged, "but not the kind you're thinking." "Greg's reviewed the trust documents," she continued, her lawyer's precision returning. "They're legitimate. Dad created an irrevocable charitable trust 15 years ago with the ranch as the primary asset. We can't sell it, Mom. Not without a protracted legal battle that we'd likely lose." I absorbed this information, surprised to find myself relieved rather than concerned. "What about the mineral rights offer?" "The trust owns those too, though there's a clause allowing limited extraction with environmental safeguards," she sighed. "Nothing like the scorched earth approach the mining company wants." "So, no $25 million windfall?" "No." She glanced sideways at me. "Michael's taking it hard. He's been counting on that money to expand his business." I thought of Michael's luxury home in Cherry Creek, his vacation property in Vail, his children in private schools. He's done well enough without it. "We all have," Jennifer admitted. "Even David, when he's sober." We sat in companionable silence, studying the photographic evidence of James's parallel life. "Why didn't he tell us?" Jennifer finally asked, the lawyer facade cracking to reveal the hurt daughter beneath. "Did he think we wouldn't understand? That we'd try to stop him?" "I think," I said slowly, "he feared what knowing would do to me. And once that pattern of secrecy was established, it became easier to maintain than to break." "But all that money, Mom. $3 million that could have helped his own family." I gestured toward the photos. "These people became his family too, Jenny. Look at their faces. Really look." She studied the images more carefully, her expression softening. "They all look at him like he saved them," I finished. "Because he did." Another knock, and Michael appeared, his face tight with barely controlled anger. "Well, Jennifer's confirmed it. Dad screwed us all with his secret charity project." "Michael," I chided, "that's not fair." "Fair?" he scoffed. "What's not fair is discovering your father led a double life for 30 years. What's not fair is finding out the inheritance you counted on doesn't exist because he gave it all away to strangers." "They're not strangers to him," Jennifer said quietly, surprising me with her shift in perspective. "Look at these photos, Michael. Really look at them." "I don't care," he snapped. "He lied to us, Mom, for decades. How can you be so calm about this?" Before I could respond, David appeared behind Michael, his expression unusually serene. "Because she understands what you don't, Mike. Dad didn't do this against us. He did it for Ben." "Don't bring Benjamin into this," Michael warned, his voice dropping dangerously. "This has nothing to do with him." "It has everything to do with him," David insisted. "This whole place exists because of what happened to Ben. It's Dad's way of making something good come from something terrible." He stepped into the room, addressing me directly. "Maggie showed me the video, Mom. The one Dad made at the memorial." "What video?" I asked, though I remembered Maggie mentioning it earlier. "Dad recorded messages at Ben's memorial. For 30 years. On the anniversary." David's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Maggie says there's one he made specifically for you to see, when you were ready." Michael threw up his hands in disgust. "More manipulative theatrics." "It's not theatrics," David said firmly. "It's Dad talking to Mom, and I think she deserves to hear him out." Jennifer placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You don't have to watch it now, Mom, or ever if you don't want to." But I was already standing. "Where is it?" David led us downstairs to James's office, where Maggie waited, a tablet computer in her hands. "I wasn't sure if tonight was the right time," she said uncertainly. But when David asked, "I want to see it," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We'll give you privacy," Maggie suggested, but I shook my head. "No, my children should see this too." I sat at James's desk, my surviving children gathering behind me as Maggie set up the tablet and discreetly left. The video began with James's face filling the screen. My husband, clearly in his final months, though I hadn't recognized his decline at the time. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 3 weeks before his death. Behind him stood Benjamin's memorial, flower-bedecked as always. "Ellie," he began, his familiar voice sending a shock through me. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and you've found your way back to the ranch, back to this place." He gestured at the memorial behind him. "I've made hundreds of these videos over the years, talking to you, to Ben, trying to explain what I couldn't say in person. Maggie will give you access to them all if you want them. But this one's the truth I should have told you 30 years ago." James shifted, revealing more of the lake behind him. "Ellie girl, the day Ben drowned wasn't your fault. It was mine." I gasped, feeling my children tense behind me. "I know you've carried this guilt for decades," James continued, his eyes glistening, "believing that if you hadn't been preparing his surprise birthday cake, if you'd been watching him instead. But the truth is, I told him he could go to the lake that morning." My hands flew to my mouth. "He asked if he could try fishing with his new rod. I said yes, told him to stay on the dock. I promised I'd join him in 15 minutes after I fixed the tractor, but I got caught up in the repair, lost track of time. You were in the kitchen, thinking he was with me. I was in the barn, thinking he was still waiting for me." James wiped a tear. By the time either of us realized he'd gone to the water alone, I felt Jennifer's hand on my shoulder, squeezing tightly. "I couldn't tell you then. You were so broken, Ellie, and I was a coward. Watching you blame yourself was easier than admitting I'd given permission. As the years passed, it became impossible to confess. How do you tell someone you've let them carry undeserved guilt for decades?" James took a deep breath, composing himself. "So instead, I tried to atone, to make Benjamin's death mean something. Every child taught to swim safely, every veteran given purpose, every family sheltered. They're all part of our son's legacy. The boy who loved everyone, who never met a stranger, who wanted to save every stray animal we found. He lives on in this place, Ellie, in ways I couldn't explain without revealing my own culpability." Behind me, Michael made a soft, wounded sound. "I don't know if you can forgive me," James continued, "for Benjamin, for the lies, for creating this place without you. But I hope someday you'll see that in my broken way, I was trying to honor both our son and you, the woman who taught me that love is about lifting others up." He leaned closer to the camera. "The trust will protect the ranch after I'm gone. The community can continue without me, but it would flourish with your heart guiding it, Ellie. If you can find it in yourself to forgive me, to embrace what grew from our greatest loss, there's room for you here. Room for all our family, if they choose it." James smiled sadly. "I've loved you completely, Eleanor Mitchell, even in my deception, and Benjamin would be so proud of the lives saved in his name." The screen went dark. For several heartbeats, none of us moved or spoke. Then Michael turned abruptly and left the room. Jennifer, tears streaming down her face, squeezed my shoulder once more before following him. David remained, his hand resting gently on my back as 30 years of misplaced guilt washed over me in waves of grief and revelation. "He knew," I whispered. "All these years, he knew I blamed myself, and he blamed himself," David said quietly. "So he built all this to make amends." I looked up at my youngest son, suddenly seeing him with new clarity. "You're not angry about the money." David shook his head. "I never cared about that. And after seeing this place, understanding what Dad created, I'm proud of him, Mom. For the first time since Ben died, I feel like our family did something that matters." As the night deepened around the ranch, Benjamin's ranch, James's vision, I began to understand the legacy my husband had left, not just for strangers, but for us. A way to transform our family's greatest tragedy into purpose. If only I could find the strength to accept it. Dawn broke over the ranch with a spectacular riot of colors, purples and oranges streaking across the vast Montana sky. I'd barely slept, spending hours reading through James's journals after watching his confession video. Each entry revealed another piece of the intricate mosaic he'd created in our son's memory. I stood now on the porch of the main house, coffee mug warming my hands, watching the ranch come alive. Veterans headed to the greenhouse, children gathered for breakfast before school. A group of women left for their jobs in nearby towns, carpooling in one of the ranch's vehicles. This well-oiled community had functioned without me, without my knowledge, for decades. "Early riser like your husband," came Rose's voice as she joined me, moving slowly with her cane. James always said sunrise over the mountains was God's daily reminder that beauty follows darkness. "That sounds like him," I agreed, making room for her on the bench. "He was always the optimist in our marriage." "Yet he carried such guilt," Rose said softly. "Sometimes when he thought no one was watching, the weight of it showed in his eyes." "I never saw it," I admitted. "How did I not see it?" "Because he didn't want you to." Rose patted my hand. James was skilled at compartmentalizing. Doctor mode, husband mode, ranch mode, each separate and distinct. 3 decades of deception, I mused. "I keep trying to be angry, but all I feel is grief," Rose supplied. "For the shared healing you might have had, for the years you could have been part of this." A small figure bounded across the yard, Thomas, heading for the stables where David had spent the night. My youngest son emerged, hair tousled from sleep, smiling at Thomas's enthusiasm. "Your son belongs here," Rose said, following my gaze. "I've never seen Thomas connect with someone so quickly. Not since James." I thought of David's struggles over the years, the rehab stints, the depression, the difficulty maintaining relationships. David has always been searching for something. Purpose, maybe. "We have that in abundance here," Rose replied. "What we lack are enough hands to share the load." Before I could respond, Michael's BMW pulled into the yard. He'd left last night after the video, driving to a hotel in the nearest town. Now he returned, his expression unreadable as he approached the porch. "Morning," he said stiffly. "Jennifer's on her way. We need to talk, Mom." Rose took the hint, rising slowly. "I'll leave you to your family business, but Eleanor, when you're ready, Maggie has something for you in James's office." After she left, Michael sat beside me, exhaling heavily. "I didn't sleep last night." "Neither did I admitted. "I kept thinking about Dad's video, about Benjamin, about all of this." He gestured vaguely toward the bustling ranch. "I was 12 when Ben died. Old enough to understand, but too young to process it properly. I remember deciding someone had to be the strong one for you and Dad." "You were," I said softly. "So responsible, so adult-like overnight." "I resented it," he confessed. "Resented losing both Ben and my childhood in one day. Resented Dad for falling apart when I needed him most." I'd never heard Michael speak this way. My eldest had always been the practical one, the unemotional one, the successful one who never looked back. "And then last night," he continued, "watching Dad confess, seeing his guilt, his pain, it was like meeting a stranger. The father I knew would never have kept such secrets." "None of us knew him completely," I said. "Not even me." Michael's jaw tightened. "The money still bothers me, Mom. $3 million given to strangers while his own family struggled. Jennifer's medical debt after Greg's layoff, David's rehab costs, my business expansion loans. We weren't struggling, Michael," I corrected gently. "We were comfortable, privileged even. These people had nothing. They're not our responsibility. They were to James. And maybe that's what family really means, extending responsibility beyond blood." I studied my son's face, seeing the boy he'd been beneath the successful businessman he'd become. "Your father built something remarkable here, Michael, something that honors Benjamin in ways I never could." Michael looked away, watching as David and Thomas led horses from the stable. "Dad's video mentioned there being room for all our family here. What did he mean by that?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I intend to find out." Jennifer's car arrived, parking beside Michael's. She emerged with her husband Greg, both looking solemn. "We need to discuss the legal implications," she said without preamble as they joined us. "The trust is valid, but there may be ways to restructure it that benefit both the ranch and our family." "Always the lawyer," Michael muttered. "Someone has to be practical," she retorted. $25 million is still on the table from the mining company. If we can negotiate limited extraction rights that don't displace residents— "No," I interrupted, surprising myself with my certainty. "No mining. Not yet. Not until I understand everything James built here." Greg cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mitchell, with all due respect, the offer won't stay open indefinitely. The company has other options." "Then let them pursue those options," I said firmly. "This land was Benjamin's playground, James's sanctuary, and now home to dozens who have nowhere else. I won't rush into decisions that destroy any of that." Jennifer and Greg exchanged glances, clearly having expected a different response. Maggie wants to see me, I continued, standing. Something James left. Will you join me? We found Maggie in James's office, a worn leather box on the desk before her. These are the letters, she said simply. One for each month for 30 years. James wrote them after every visit but never sent them. 360 letters, Jennifer calculated aloud. 372, Maggie corrected. He was very disciplined. I approached the box reverently, lifting the lid to reveal bundles of envelopes, each tied with string and labeled by year. Have you read them? I asked Maggie. No, she replied. They were for you alone. James was very clear about that. I selected the earliest bundle from the year after Benjamin died. The first envelope was addressed in James's familiar handwriting. For Ellie, when you're ready to know. With trembling fingers, I opened it and began to read aloud. My dearest Ellie, I've just spent my first weekend back at the ranch since we left. I told you I was at a medical conference in Portland. Forgive the deception. I couldn't sell this place, Ellie. Not where Ben's spirit still feels so present. The lake haunts me as it does you, but somehow being here, facing it directly, brings a strange peace that eludes me in Denver. Today, I repaired the dock where he used to fish. Tomorrow, I'll clear the path to the meadow where he flew his kite. Small acts of remembrance that feel like prayer. A local veteran, Robert Winters, has been sleeping in our barn. Instead of calling the sheriff, I've invited him to stay, to help with repairs. He has the same hollow look we do, Ellie. The look of someone who has lost something irreplaceable. Perhaps that's why I let him stay, because he understands that some wounds never fully heal, they just become part of who you are. I want to tell you about this place, about how it feels both haunted and healing. But when I called home tonight and heard the lightness in your voice as you described your new teaching position, I couldn't bear to reopen wounds that are finally beginning to scab over. So I carry this secret for now, this small solace that helps me breathe when grief threatens to suffocate me. Perhaps someday we can share it. Until then, know that in this place where we lost our son, I am keeping his memory alive in the only way I know how, by helping others who are lost themselves. All my love, James. I looked up, tears blurring my vision. Michael stood rigid, his expression conflicted. Jennifer wiped her eyes discreetly. Greg studied the floor, an outsider witnessing our family's raw exposure. There are hundreds more, Maggie said softly. Documenting everything, the first veterans cabin, the greenhouse installation, the swimming program, Thomas and Rose's arrival, the trust formation. James recorded it all for you. He wanted me to know, I realized, just not until he thought I could bear it, or until he was gone and couldn't witness your pain, Michael suggested, his voice rougher than usual. Either way, Jennifer said, he left us a roadmap to his heart, to the life he led without us. I replaced the letter in its envelope, overcome by the magnitude of what lay before me. Hundreds of confessions, explanations, invitations to understand the husband I thought I'd known completely. There's more, Maggie said hesitantly. James left instructions for all of you. If you chose to embrace the ranch, what kind of instructions? Jennifer asked, lawyer mode engaging. Opportunities, Maggie clarified. Ways each of you could be involved in the ranch's future if you wanted to be. He never assumed you would, but he hoped. I thought of James's words in the video. There's room for all our family here, if they choose it. Show us, I said. As Maggie retrieved another folder from James's desk, I caught David watching from the doorway, Thomas beside him. My youngest son's expression held something I hadn't seen in years, hope. And in that moment, I began to understand what James had always known, that healing doesn't come from running away from tragedy, but from transforming it into purpose. The question was whether our fractured family could find unity in continuing what James had begun, or whether his dual life would ultimately drive us further apart. Maggie opened the folder and removed several documents, each bearing one of our names. James prepared these during his final months, when his heart condition was worsening. He never told anyone about his diagnosis, not even me until the very end. Another secret. How many had my husband carried to protect those he loved? He called these his legacy proposals, Maggie continued, handing each of us our designated envelope. Mine was thicker than the others, its weight significant in my trembling hands. Michael tore his open immediately, scanning the contents with narrowed eyes. Jennifer, Ever the methodical one, carefully slid a finger beneath the flap, preserving the envelope as potential evidence. David accepted his with reverence, but made no move to open it, watching his siblings' reactions instead. I broke the seal on mine, finding several pages covered in James's precise handwriting. The first page began simply, "Dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, you've discovered Mitchell Ranch and all it encompasses. You've learned of my 3-decade deception, or dedication, depending on your perspective. The question now is, what happens next? I've established legal protections for this community through the trust, ensuring it can continue without us. But it would thrive with Mitchell family involvement, not out of obligation, but out of choice. The choice to transform our family's greatest tragedy into its most meaningful legacy. For you, my beloved wife, I propose the role you were always meant for, community historian and heartkeeper. Your gift as a history teacher, your ability to help others connect to the past while building toward the future. These talents are desperately needed here. The children need to understand where they came from to see where they might go. The veterans need their stories preserved with dignity. And Benjamin's memory needs to be woven throughout, not as a ghost that haunts, but as the foundation that supports. Should you accept, the trust provides a modest salary and living quarters, our old home, restored to comfort but preserved in essence. More importantly, it offers purpose for your retirement years and healing for your heart. The decision is entirely yours. You may choose to visit occasionally, to remain at a distance, or to embrace this place fully. All I ask is that you consider the possibility that in running from this land for 30 years, you may have been running from your own healing. With eternal love, James' additional pages detailed practical matters, financial provisions, transitional assistance, even curriculum suggestions for historical programming. James had thought of everything, planning for a future he wouldn't live to see. I looked up to find Michael standing abruptly, his proposal crumpled in his fist. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "What did yours say?" Jennifer asked, her own pages held protectively against her chest. Michael laughed bitterly. "Dad wants me to use my business acumen to establish sustainable revenue streams for the ranch. Suggested I relocate my investment firm's satellite office to Billings and serve as the trust's financial advisor. Even outlined expansion opportunities for ecotourism and therapeutic retreat services that could benefit both the community and provide professional fulfillment." "He thought that far ahead?" Jennifer seemed impressed despite herself. "Oh, it gets better," Michael continued. "He's offering matching funds from the trust for any investment I make in ranch enterprises. A partnership, he calls it, as if I'd uproot my entire life to manage his secret charity project." The bitterness in his voice didn't quite mask the underlying hurt. The son who'd built his own success, feeling his father had been planning a different future for him all along. "What about yours?" I asked Jennifer gently. She swallowed hard. "Legal oversight. Dad suggests I establish a nonprofit law practice specializing in veterans' benefits, immigrant rights, and domestic violence protection, all issues affecting ranch residents. He's arranged for mentorship with Robert and connections to advocacy organizations in Billings." Her voice softened. "He writes that my passion for justice has always outweighed my desire for corporate success, even when you couldn't admit it to yourself." I saw the conflict in her eyes. The ambitious attorney who'd fought for partnership at her prestigious firm suddenly confronted with an alternate vision of her professional identity. "David?" I prompted, noticing my youngest still clutching his unopened envelope. He shook his head. "I don't need to read it. I already know." "Know what?" Michael demanded. "That Dad saw me clearly when the rest of you saw only my failures." David's voice held no accusation, just simple truth, that he understood why I kept falling apart in the structured world you all navigated so easily. "You don't know what he proposed," Jennifer pointed out. "Something with the horses," David said confidently. "Something that uses my empathy rather than treating it as a weakness. Something that acknowledges I've been looking for purpose since Ben died." Maggie nodded slightly, confirming David's intuition without revealing specifics. Michael paced the small office, agitation evident in every movement. "This is emotional manipulation from beyond the grave. Dad spent 30 years living a double life, and now he expects us to abandon our existing lives to continue his secret project? I have a family in Denver, a successful business, kids in schools they love. He doesn't expect anything," I corrected gently. "He's offering possibilities, while leveraging guilt and sentimentality." Michael retorted. Classic Dad, making emotional appeals seem like rational choices. Jennifer studied her pages thoughtfully. The proposals are surprisingly practical, though. Dad researched the legal barriers to what he's suggesting for me. He's included contact information for organizations already interested in partnership. It's thorough. Of course it is, Michael scoffed. Dad had 30 years to plan how to rope us into this place after he was gone. Or 30 years to understand what might bring each of us fulfillment, David suggested quietly. Fulfillment we haven't found in the lives we've built. Michael rounded on him. Speak for yourself. Some of us are perfectly fulfilled. Are you, Mike? David challenged, unusual confidence in his voice. Is that why you work 70 hours a week? Why you've been divorced twice? Why Tyler barely speaks to you, despite living in your house? You little... Michael began, stepping toward David. That's enough, I interjected, standing between my sons. James gave us choices, not mandates. We each decide for ourselves. Including you, Mom? Jennifer asked, her lawyer's perception homing in on my evasion. Have you decided? All eyes turned to me. My children, Maggie, even Greg, who had remained a respectful observer to our family drama. I've spent 30 years running from this place, I said slowly, finding my way to truth with each word, refusing to speak Benjamin's name, keeping his room like a museum, flinching when James mentioned Montana. I took a deep breath, and none of it brought healing. None of it honored our son's life or made sense of his death. I gestured toward the window, where ranch residents went about their morning routines. But this community has saved lives, given hope, created family for those without one, all in Benjamin's name. So you're staying, Michael concluded flatly. I'm considering it, I corrected. I want to read all James's letters first, understand everything he built here, then decide. And if we don't want to be part of this grand vision, Michael pressed, then that's your choice, I replied simply. James protected the ranch legally, regardless of our involvement. This place will continue with or without Mitchell family participation. The tension in the room was broken by Thomas appearing in the doorway. David, the new horse is eating. You said you'd help brush her. David smiled, tucking his still unopened envelope into his pocket. Coming, Thomas. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm staying. At least for a while. The rest of you can do whatever you want with Dad's proposals, but I've found something here I've been searching for my whole adult life. After he left, Michael shook his head in frustration. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Dad's created some fantasy world here that's sucking us in one by one. Or perhaps, Jennifer suggested cautiously, he created something real in a world that often feels like fantasy. You two? Michael looked betrayed. What happened to your partnership track? The Supreme Court ambitions? Jennifer shrugged, a gesture so unlike my always certain daughter that it momentarily stunned me. I don't know, Michael, but I do know I haven't been happy despite achieving everything I thought I wanted. Maybe Dad saw that when I couldn't. This is insane, Michael muttered. We're supposed to have careers and lives in Denver, not run off to play charity workers on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Your father commuted for 30 years, Maggie observed quietly. Created impact in both worlds. Perhaps such balance is possible for all of you. Michael stormed out, Greg following after an apologetic glance toward Jennifer. My daughter stayed, studying her father's proposal with new eyes. He knew me better than I thought, she admitted softly. How did he see what I've only recently begun to acknowledge to myself? Your father had a gift for seeing beneath surfaces, I replied, even while keeping his own depths hidden. Outside, I could see David with Thomas by the stables, Michael standing by his car with a phone pressed to his ear, and the daily life of Mitchell Ranch continuing around them. Lives James had saved, futures he had altered, all flowing from the devastating loss that had nearly destroyed our family. And for the first time in 30 years, I allowed myself to wonder if Benjamin's death, while never making sense, might yet have meaning through this unexpected legacy. The meeting was arranged for noon at the Lighthouse Point Cafe in Rockport, public enough for safety, private enough for sensitive conversation. Marcus had agreed with surprising readiness when Tom's intermediaries made contact, suggesting he'd been anticipating our approach. I dressed carefully that morning in clothes that projected confident professionalism, a navy blazer over a simple blouse, tailored slacks, minimal jewelry except for the sea glass pendant Jonathan had given me decades ago. My armor for the negotiation ahead. Transmitter embedded in your watch, Tom reminded me, adjusting the elegant timepiece on my wrist. Panic button under the clasp, press twice to activate emergency protocol. Security teams positioned here, here, and here, Jonathan added from his seat at the operational planning table, leg propped carefully to minimize pain. He indicated points on the map spread before him. Michael will be at the counter inside the cafe. Emma remains here with our evidence package, ready to transmit if anything goes wrong. Michael looked distinctly unhappy with his assigned role. I should be at a table near Mom, not across the room. You're too recognizable as her son, Tom explained patiently. Counter position gives you clear sight lines to the entire cafe while maintaining plausible deniability of connection. The preparations continued with military precision. Communication checks, emergency extraction routes, contingency plans for various scenarios. Through it all, I maintained outward calm, though my stomach tightened with each passing minute. You don't have to do this, Jonathan said quietly, when we found ourselves momentarily alone. There's still time to implement the disappearance protocol instead, and spend months or years in hiding, watching over our shoulders? No, I shook my head firmly. Michael has his charter business. Emma has her research, a baby coming. They deserve their lives back, not another disruption. Jonathan studied me with those sea-green eyes that still saw too much. And what about you, Claire? What do you deserve? Closure, I replied simply. One way or another. The drive to Rockport passed in tense silence, Michael at the wheel while I mentally rehearsed my approach. We'd agreed I would offer Marcus a straightforward deal. His cooperation in bringing down his father's criminal enterprises in exchange for immunity for himself and preservation of the legitimate aspects of Crowley shipping. The evidence from the diplomatic pouches would be released regardless, but his cooperation could determine whether he emerged as a reformer who helped dismantle corruption or was destroyed alongside his father. The Lighthouse Point Cafe sat perched on a bluff overlooking the harbor, its wide windows offering spectacular ocean views. Once a favorite spot for Jonathan and me during our early years together, it now served as the stage for perhaps the most important negotiation of my life. I'll enter first, Michael reminded me as we parked a block away. Establish position, confirm security, then signal all clear. I nodded, watching him walk away with the confident stride that reminded me so much of his father. Despite everything, I felt a surge of maternal pride. My son, stepping into danger to protect his family. All of our children had shown remarkable resilience and courage throughout this ordeal. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with the anticipated text, "Coffee's good today." The simple code phrase indicated all security measures were in place. With a deep breath to steady myself, I made my way to the cafe. Marcus Crowley sat alone at a corner table, gazing out at the ocean. In person, he appeared younger than in the surveillance photos, perhaps 45, with his father's distinguished features softened by what might have been his mother's gentler genetics. He rose politely as I approached. "Mrs. Sullivan," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Mr. Crowley," I replied, accepting the handshake briefly before taking the seat opposite him. "I believe we have matters of mutual interest to discuss." A waitress approached, one of Tom's operatives, I realized, recognizing her from the safe house preparations. We both ordered coffee, waiting until she retreated before continuing. "Your husband is alive," Marcus stated without preamble, "and has been conducting an extensive investigation into my family for over a decade. No point denying what he clearly knew." "Yes, and you've recently recovered certain historical documents from a shipwreck site, documents that could prove problematic for many established interests." "Also, yes," Marcus nodded thoughtfully, stirring his coffee though he'd added neither cream nor sugar. "May I ask what you hope to accomplish with these documents, Mrs. Sullivan?" "Justice," I replied simply. "Accountability for crimes past and present. Safety for my family after years of living under threat. Noble goals." His tone held no mockery, which surprised me. "And where do I fit into these aspirations?" I leaned forward slightly. "You stand at a crossroads, Mr. Crowley. Your father built an empire on both legitimate business and criminal enterprise. You're his heir to both, but you don't have to accept the latter." Interest flickered in his eyes. "You're suggesting I have a choice." "Everyone has choices," I said, thinking of Jonathan's impossible decision 11 years ago, "even when the options seem limited." "And what choice are you offering me?" I laid out our proposal succinctly, his cooperation in dismantling his father's criminal network in exchange for immunity and preservation of Crowley Shipping's legitimate operations. The evidence would become public regardless, but his position within the resulting storm would depend entirely on his actions now. Marcus listened intently, asking occasional clarifying questions, but revealing little of his thoughts. When I finished, he gazed out at the ocean for a long moment before responding. "Did you know my mother committed suicide when I was 15? He asked unexpectedly. "Official report said accidental overdose, but I found her note years later. She couldn't live with what she knew about my father's business dealings. I hadn't known this detail, despite Jonathan's extensive research. I'm sorry." Harvard Business School, groomed from birth to take over the family empire. A hint of bitterness colored his words, never allowed to question where the money came from or how power was maintained. "Until recently?" I prompted gently. Marcus's gaze returned to me, sharp and assessing. "What makes you think something has changed? You approached our research vessel personally yesterday, sought me specifically rather than sending subordinates. That suggests you wanted dialogue, not elimination." A slight smile touched his lips. "Perceptive. Yes, things have changed. My father's illness has forced certain reckonings. Terminal cancer," I acknowledged. Jonathan discovered that detail. 6 months at most, according to specialists. Marcus's expression hardened. "He's become increasingly desperate, increasingly reckless. The order to pursue your family came directly from him, against my recommendation for more subtle approaches. You opposed targeting us? I opposed unnecessary violence when other solutions might be available." He leaned forward. "Mrs. Sullivan, I've spent 5 years secretly documenting my father's criminal enterprises, building my own case file against the organization I'm supposed to inherit. The revelation stunned me momentarily. You're already working against him? Working toward a transition," he corrected carefully. "The legitimate shipping business employs thousands, contributes significantly to the regional economy. I've been seeking a way to excise the criminal elements without destroying everything. And now we've handed you the historical evidence that completes your case," I realized. "Potentially." Marcus studied me thoughtfully. "If what you found is as comprehensive as you claim." I removed a small digital device from my pocket, a secure thumb drive containing sample images from the diplomatic pouches. "See for yourself. The originals remain secure, with copies positioned for automatic release if anything happens to my family." Marcus examined the files carefully, his professional composure slipping slightly as he absorbed the implications of the century-old documents. "This would destroy not just my father, but dozens of prominent families, institutions, political careers. Justice often has widespread consequences," I observed. He closed the files, returning the device. "What you're proposing, my cooperation in exchange for immunity and preservation of legitimate assets, would require significant trust on both sides." "Yes. Why should I trust you or your husband after he spent 11 years building a case against my family?" "Because Jonathan's goal was never destruction for its own sake," I explained. "It was justice and family protection. If those can be achieved through your cooperation rather than your destruction, he'll accept that outcome." Marcus considered this, fingers drumming lightly on the table. "And why should you trust me? I am my father's son, after all." "Because you approached me directly when you could have simply had your men eliminate me," I replied. "Because you mentioned your mother's suicide, a personal detail irrelevant to negotiation unless it represents a moral turning point for you. And because your body language throughout this conversation has shown genuine conflict rather than deception." A genuine smile broke through his professional facade. "You're quite formidable, Mrs. Sullivan. I see why your husband went to such lengths to protect you." "Do we have an agreement?" I pressed. "In principle, yes." Marcus straightened, businessman once more. "I'll need 24 hours to secure certain critical documentation from my father's private vault, material that will complement your historical evidence and implicate current criminal associates. Then I'll contact federal authorities with my attorney present." "And your father?" Something complicated passed across Marcus's features. Grief, resolution, perhaps relief. "He'll be arrested along with the others. His illness may mean he dies in custody rather than prison, but justice will be served." We finalized the details of our arrangement, establishing verification protocols and safety guarantees for both sides. As our meeting concluded, Marcus offered one final observation. Your husband's deception, allowing you to believe he was dead for 11 years, that must have been devastating to discover. It was, I acknowledged. Yet here you are, negotiating on his behalf, continuing his mission. Marcus studied me curiously. That suggests either extraordinary commitment to justice or extraordinary capacity for forgiveness. The question implicit in his statement lingered as we parted ways. Marcus to begin dismantling his father's criminal legacy, me to report our successful negotiation to my waiting family. Michael maintained his position until I was safely in our vehicle, then joined me for the drive back to the safe house. Well? He asked anxiously, as we pulled away from the curb. We have a deal, I confirmed. And something we didn't expect. Marcus has been building his own case against his father for years. He'll provide additional evidence, cooperate with authorities. Relief transformed Michael's expression. So it's over. We're safe. Not quite yet, I cautioned. But soon. 24 hours for Marcus to secure additional evidence, then the case goes to federal authorities. When we returned to the safe house, I provided a full debriefing of the negotiation to Jonathan, Emma, and Tom. Their reactions ranged from cautious optimism to outright suspicion. It could be an elaborate trap, Tom warned. A delaying tactic while Victor positions assets for your elimination. I don't think so, I disagreed. Marcus was genuine. His desire to salvage the legitimate business while excising the criminal elements aligns perfectly with his actions over recent years. I agree with Claire, Jonathan said, surprising everyone. Marcus's gradual divergence from his father's methods has been documented in our surveillance. This represents a logical culmination of that trend. The next 24 hours passed with excruciating slowness, all of us maintaining heightened vigilance despite my confidence in our agreement. Jonathan's injured leg was properly treated by a discreet medical professional from Tom's network. Emma coordinated secure communications with her husband, reassuring him of her safety without revealing specifics of our situation. And I found myself increasingly drawn to quiet moments with Jonathan, our conversations gradually shifting from operational necessities to personal reconnection. Tentative, cautious, but undeniably real. What happens next? He asked, as we sat together on the safe house porch, watching the sunset paint the ocean in magnificent golds and crimsons. After this is truly over? I suppose that depends on Marcus fulfilling his end of our arrangement, I replied, deliberately misunderstanding his question. Jonathan smiled faintly, seeing through the evasion. That's not what I meant, Claire. I know. I gazed out at the horizon, gathering thoughts that had been swirling since his miraculous return from the dead. 11 years is a long time, Jonathan. We're different people now. Yes, he agreed simply. What you did, the choice you made, I understand it better now. The impossible situation you faced. I turned to face him directly. Understanding isn't the same as forgetting, but it's a start. Hope flickered in his sea-green eyes, quickly tempered with realism. I don't expect things to return to what they were, Claire. That would be foolish and unfair. What do you expect then? Nothing, he said softly. I hope, but I don't expect. There's a difference. Before I could respond, Tom appeared at the doorway. It's happening. Federal agents just arrested Victor Crowley at his estate. Marcus is giving testimony now. The next hours brought cascading confirmations. News reports of shocking arrests throughout the Eastern Seaboard's business and political establishment. Marcus Crowley publicly cooperating with authorities. The contents of the diplomatic pouches providing historical context to a century of corruption finally exposed to daylight. By midnight, it was clear our negotiation had succeeded beyond expectations. The threat that had shaped our lives for over a decade was dissolving before our eyes, justice unfolding in real time across news channels and official statements. It's really over, Emma said wonderingly, as we gathered in the safe house main room, watching the developments unfold. We can go back to our lives. Better lives, Michael added, the tension he'd carried for days finally easing from his shoulders. Without looking over our shoulders, Jonathan watched the celebrations with quiet satisfaction, though I noticed he remained slightly apart, uncertain of his place in this family reunion. This return to normalcy that had no natural space for a man legally dead for 11 years. Later, when the others had retired to bed, I found him on the porch again, gazing at the star-filled sky. "You did it," I said, joining him at the railing. "After 11 years, you brought Crowley down, found the evidence, protected the family. We did it," he corrected gently. "I couldn't have succeeded without you, without Michael, without all of us working together. What will you do now?" I asked the question that had hovered unspoken between us. "Daniel Waters can't simply return to his fishing village, I imagine." "No," Jonathan agreed. "That identity is compromised. Tom has alternatives prepared. New documentation, new background, perhaps somewhere warm this time. I've had enough of Maine winters." The casual way he referenced starting yet another new life, alone, separated from us, sparked an unexpected pain in my chest. "Is that what you want?" I pressed. "Another solitary existence?" Jonathan turned to face me fully, vulnerability evident in his expression. "What I want and what I deserve may be different things, Claire." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But after everything, after all we've been through, don't you think we've earned the right to decide that for ourselves? Together?" Hope bloomed in his eyes, cautious, but unmistakable. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that forgiveness is a process, not an event. That healing takes time." I moved closer, close enough to see the familiar flecks of gold in his sea-green irises. "I'm saying that I'm willing to explore what might still exist between Claire Sullivan and Jonathan Sullivan. Not as we were, but as we are now. Even after everything I put you through." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Because of everything we've been through," I corrected, "separately and together." I reached for his hand, our fingers intertwining with the comfortable familiarity of decades together and the tentative newness of beginning again. "I can't promise what this will become," I cautioned, "but I'm willing to find out." Jonathan's hand tightened around mine, his eyes suspiciously bright in the moonlight. "That's more than I ever dared hope for." As we stood together on that island porch, the vast Atlantic stretching before us like the uncertain future we now faced, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 11 long years. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but its essential prerequisite, possibility. The sea glass pendant at my throat caught the moonlight, its blue depths echoing the promise Jonathan had engraved in our old boat's bell so many years ago. "The treasure that matters most is the journey we share." Our journey had taken unexpected, painful turns, had separated us across years and lies and oceans of grief. But perhaps, like sea glass transformed by tumultuous waters, what remained had been shaped into something new, something that, while bearing the marks of its difficult journey, might still catch the light in beautiful and unexpected ways. Only time would tell, and for the first time in 11 years, time felt like a gift rather than a burden.